it's me, Tulip, from the California Watershed Council, and I'm here at Bryant Park in Albany, and today we're going to figure out what a watershed is. So I work with California Watershed Council, but today we're going to learn all about what watersheds are and what services they provide. So let's do some brainstorming of what a watershed is. Check out these clues to get an idea of what you think a watershed might be. Look over the first activity before you finish the rest of this video and see if you can come up with some ideas of what you think a watershed might be. Now that you have an idea of what a watershed might be, maybe this will help fine-tune your explanation. So if we think of, right now I am a watershed, my arms are maybe mountains or hills, and what happens on the top of these mountains? Well, we get snowfall, right? Maybe we get rain on lower parts, but all that water eventually needs to go somewhere. Sometimes the snow will melt, right? And it'll trickle down maybe in creeks or in small rivers and streams, and it'll all collect in one location. And that's kind of like your head, right? So all of this water trickles down from the landscape and collects in one location. Maybe it's a lake, maybe it's the ocean, right? But a watershed is all of those connections, all the pathways that a water travels. So the creeks, the rivers, the streams, the lakes, and out to the ocean. So all of us live in a watershed of some sort. Maybe you live closer to where the creeks are, or high up in the mountains. Maybe you live right on the lake or on the ocean front. But all of us live in watersheds. And we have a map here that I can show you that shows all the different watershed councils and the different watersheds in the state of Oregon. So check it out and see where your house falls. What watershed do you live in? Now that we have an idea of what a watershed is, let's see how they work. So we're going to create a model of a watershed. We're going to create our very own little mini watershed and see how they work. So when we set this up, you're going to want to make sure you do it either outside or over maybe a bathtub or a big sink, because it can get a little messy. So let's go ahead and gather all the materials we're going to need to make our watershed. So these are the materials that you're going to need. Now that I have all my materials, I can go ahead and start making my landscape that's going to be on my watershed. So your materials might look a little bit different, but that's okay. They'll all still work. So I've got my cups, my marker, I've got some food coloring, you might have some oil or some syrup, and then I've got tape and my bag and my nice deep tray. So I'm going to go ahead and get started building my landscape. Alright, so I'm going to use my cups that I have, and I have a couple sizes, but it's fine if you only have one, as some hills on a landscape. So maybe this big cup is going to be a mountain, and then I've got some smaller cups that I can kind of stick around to be my foothills. So now that I've got my cups where I want them, I can use some tape to kind of secure them if we want, or I can go ahead and just drape over my bag. So my cups are going to be my hills and mountains, and then my bag is going to be the earth that covers them. Okay, so now that I have my landscape, I'm gonna go ahead and draw some houses and buildings at the base of my foothills here. my buildings all set up and even a little ski lodge with a little skier, I'm gonna go ahead and add some pollution to my landscape near all the buildings. So I'm just gonna do a drop of food coloring. You might have some syrup or some oil. I'm just gonna put it by all of my buildings. And then this is a pretty big one, so maybe I'll do a couple drops. Okay, so now we can see how our watershed works by adding a little bit of rainfall onto our landscape. So if you have a spray bottle, that'll work a lot better, but I just have some water in this bin, and I'm just going to kind of use my fingers to like rain on the landscape. And we want to watch and see where our pollution goes. But all the water started rolling down my hills, and you can see where it's actually starting to collect, right? So maybe this would be a lake right here, or a river that would flow down into the valley. But I'm gonna go ahead and collect all this water into this bin, and let's take a look at all the water that would be in our watershed. So here we have all the water that we collected, and it's not exactly as clean as we would hope, right? There's a ton of that food coloring in here from all of that pollution that we had on the land. At the beginning, at the top, we didn't see a whole lot of pollution in these top parts of the hills and the mountains because there wasn't as many buildings, right? But we did see it all kind of collect down into that lake and then those rivers, right? So it all kind of flows down in together. And here's our water. So would you want to drink this water? Or do you think this water is really nice and clean to drink in general for maybe animals or for plants? Another thing to think about is, do we think that all of our water is going to stay right here in this watershed? Is it going to leave anywhere? If we think of this as the Willamette Valley, and these are the mountains, where does all that water flow to? So I mentioned earlier you could think about your watershed as the Willamette Valley. Well, right here, I'm at the mouth of the Calipoya River. So here we have the Calipoya River, and if we look over here, it is flowing straight into the Willamette. Right, so this is where the Calipoya meets the Willamette, and then the Willamette goes all the way up to the Columbia, and the Columbia then empties out into the Pacific Ocean. So all of our watersheds are connected. All of the creeks and streams on the mountains lead to these rivers that flow into bigger rivers and then eventually make their way out to the sea. So that pollution that started maybe a little tiny bit at the top of a mountain can make its way all the way down to our rivers here at the bottom. So all of our waterways are interconnected, and that pollution can flow from one watershed to another. So check out this map of the Calipoya River to see how it flows from the start all the way out to the ocean. Your turn to build your very own watershed. So have fun.